Hi, welcome to the Innovation at Scale, How to Design a Challenge webinar. My name is Elaine Chin, and I'm joined by my colleague, Juan Gomez. And today we'll be giving you a brief overview of Wazoku and also sharing 5 top tips on how to design a challenge. So Juan, why don't you go ahead and start?
Perfect. Thank you, Elaine, and welcome all to How to Design a Challenge. So we're going to do a brief introduction to Wazoku, share some tips, and then walk you through some examples of live challenges we are having on our platform. So as you know, Wazoku enables organizations to establish and run innovation process at scale, letting them to run challenges to solve problems they're facing, and using this through crowdsourcing ideas, solutions, and projects to internal and external audiences, or even suppliers, ecosystem stakeholders they want to engage clients or unknown people that are into our community. With this, they can make smarter decisions towards innovation programs, innovation problems, with metrics and reporting and insights showcasing that will generate value to their organizations and enables engaging audiences from anywhere in the world with our open community for solving problems. Just to start with the topic that we are addressing today, we would like to remind what is a challenge. For us, a challenge is a problem statement that we are putting out to a crowd, whether it's internal or external. And we offer incentives to drive contributions, different types of incentives and rewards, so we can engage properly our audience. And this is framed with this central process of challenge-driven innovation methodology, where we establish a goal, a project, or a goal for a program. And then within that particular goal, we define certain challenges that we are facing and that we want to address. Then we select the channels, understanding who is the best people or who's the best audience that can address these particular challenges. They can be employees, suppliers, stakeholders from the ecosystem, partners, clients, and unknown people on our open innovation community. Once we're gathering all these ideas, we evaluate the solutions for this particular challenge that we have launched, and then integrate it into more robust solutions, taking into account key elements from different solutions and different ideas that we have gathered, and how we can implement it and develop it into our existing projects, existing processes, into the organizations. So taking this into account as a little bit of an introduction, please, Elaine, tell us more about the 5 tips that we're bringing into this webinar today.
Thank you, Juan, for that great introduction. And once again, my name is Elaine. I am a challenge design consultant at Wazoku, and we are also, Innocentive is a Wazoku brand. So one of the questions in the chat from Rob was about how we differ from Innocentive. Well, actually, Innocentive has been rolled into Wazoku as of approximately 2 years ago, but we do have our Innocentive crowd of solvers, and I will be giving you the tips that I have gathered from my experience at Innocentive and now part of Wazoku. So without further ado, the 5 top tips that I want to talk about today is: number 1, identify the problem. Number 2, make that problem easy to understand. Number 3, think about the requirements for solvers. Number 4, consider the intellectual property. And number 5, what are the appropriate incentives for participation? So the next slide. Tip number 1, identify the problem. For example, what you want to do is you want to recognize the difference between a goal and a problem. And for the focus of many organizations today, it's sustainability. And some may say they want to be at net zero by the year 2050. That statement is a goal, not a problem. The next step is to ask why they are not at net zero right now. Is there little emphasis upon recycling? Could they be more energy efficient? Why aren't certain things happening? As a result, you must ask a series of questions to refine the problem. Perhaps you have heard of the 5 whys technique, asking 5 questions starting with why to understand the root cause of a problem. You can start each question not only with why, but also with who, what, how, etc. In order to get to the bottom of the problem, it is vital to keep probing. Once you have identified the problem, we can move on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to make it easy to understand in order to engage a global audience. The reason open innovation works is because you are distributing your challenge to a group that has different backgrounds and perspectives than the people you employ or interact with on a daily basis. To maximize engagement, you need to make the challenge as open and interesting as possible. People want to participate if they have the opportunity to make a difference. Here is an abstract from the Habitat for Humanity Challenge, Malaria Prevention through Innovations in Home Design or Home Life. The problem in this abstract is described succinctly, and the solution is laid out simply. Participation in the challenge was boosted by 2 factors. First, this is a publicly branded challenge that benefited by bringing in people familiar with the Habitat for Humanity organization. And secondly, a winning solution has the possibility of saving lives. When designing a challenge, it may be hard to separate yourself from a problem that you face every day. Therefore, you need to remember that industry-specific language is not understood by everyone. There may be certain vernacular or acronyms that you use, and while that is fine when you're speaking to colleagues or experts in the field, this is not generally the best way to communicate with a crowd. The description of a challenge should be easily understandable, and you can get into the details in the next section. Let's move on to tip number 3, requirements for solvers. Solution requirements are the items which comprise your desired solution. It's possible to get caught up in asking for the perfect solution, but I would caution against that. Make sure that you can differentiate between items that you must have, things that move the ball forward incrementally, versus nice to have, the ideal answer that may or may not be attainable. If you are trying to solve a large problem, you can break it down into a series of smaller challenges that get you from point A to point B. Solver participation is partially influenced by what they are asked to do. They like to know when they are done, and this checklist of requirements is also beneficial during the judging process. The evaluators will have an objective list of criteria to base their decisions. For open innovation challenges, only the abstract and the overview are visible to the general public. In order to read the solution requirements, solvers must agree to the terms and conditions of the challenge, such as keeping the information confidential and using it only in the context of solving the challenge. Let's move on to tip 4, considering the intellectual property. The terms and conditions that I mentioned previously appear in the challenge-specific agreement, also known as the CSA. To win, in most cases, a financial reward, solvers must agree to specific conditions with respect to intellectual property. The most restrictive is IP transfer, in which the solver assigns the intellectual property in their solution to the seeker in exchange for an award. Alternatively, in a licensing scenario, the solver retains their intellectual property, but gives the seeker a license to use the concept. Finally, there are situations where no IP is transferred at all. In these cases, seekers are promoting the research and development of new technologies in order to advance the field and improve awareness surrounding the problem. Finally, let's move on to tip number 5, solver incentives. There are many things that motivate a solver to engage with a challenge. The most obvious incentive is a financial award. When designing a challenge, make sure that the award is commensurate with the time and effort that will be expended and accurately reflects the value of a potential solution. Occasionally, challenges can be run with eligibility requirements, and while solvers might not qualify for a cash prize, they appreciate being recognized with an honorable mention or being featured in a press release. Last but not least, solvers want the opportunity to develop their solution further and collaborate or perhaps be employed by the seeker. The best solution is the one that you can validate and implement. So that wraps up the 5 top tips for how to design a challenge. The next slide, for more information about the challenges that we have, head over to the Challenge Center, where you can explore a wide range of topics across various disciplines that range from science, engineering, and social innovation. Next, Juan will give you a couple recent examples.
Thank you, Elaine. Yes, I want to bring 2 use cases that we're working at Wazoku in our platform. And the first one is the Geneva Learning Foundation. They are working towards the Immunization Agenda 2030, which is a global initiative that wants to work with immunization practitioners around the world to gather ideas and practices around how they can improve immunization work, make it better. And some recommendations that we've seen, they have received more than 1,000 ideas around practitioners, is to engage the right audience, involve people who care for the problem you're solving, taking into account what they're looking for, and that by resolving this problem, they're helping the world, they are making their lives easier too. So it's a right way to engage your audience. Select the right one you want to work with. And another recommendation is to implement challenges for wider programs in the organization. For example, the Geneva Learning Foundation wants to gather initiatives and great ideas and practices around immunization. And then what they're doing with their audience is that they're asking them to create new strategies, new actions that they would like to implement in their countries, taking into account others' ideas that have been submitted into the platform. So keep everyone engaged into this particular challenge and ask them to do further with the challenge itself. This is a way of creating community around a certain problem that needs to be solved and addressed. And then the other use case that I would like to show you is Ashoka. Ashoka is launching a challenge with Taco Bell Foundation, and they are looking for young people who have innovation actions or ventures that want to promote change in their communities or in the world. And by doing this, the winners would have access to founding and to education towards how they can improve their processes. One of the recommendations for engaging your audience is to create a space where this audience can solve questions about the challenge, make it simple and easy for them to access this kind of information. They may have doubts around what do they mean or what are the requirements that Elaine was talking about. So enable this communication with your audience. And another recommendation is use your communication assets to promote participation. take into account all the assets and all the communication strategies you have in your organization, whether you are engaging internal audiences or stakeholders or partners. Take into account all the communication channels you use on a daily basis with them, so you can improve the engagement and the participation towards your particular challenge and the case you want to address.
All right, so wrapping up, Wazoku offers you an enterprise solution for innovation at scale. We work with you to design challenges for internal and external audiences, and we want to help you change the world one idea at a time. Let me check the questions to see if there are any. I think we've addressed all the questions for right now. All participants that registered for this webinar will be receiving a link to the recording. And for more information about Wazoku, you can sign up for the webinar that will be upcoming, and that should pop up on your screen and also appear on your chat. Actually, there is one more question in the questions window. What is the cost of the solution? I can take that question. So the cost of the solution. So in terms of external challenges that we post on the Challenge Center, we have different types of challenges, and the award amount ranges from about $15,000 all the way up to $40,000 to $50,000, or even up to as much as six figures and $1 million. So it really depends on what you are trying to achieve. And we will help you look at that when we design that challenge with you. We'll look at the requirements of the solution requirements, and then we will consider approximately how much time and effort that the solver will need to expend. And then we'll come up with an amount that we recommend based upon our historical experience. Are there any other questions? And hopefully hopefully that answer addressed your question. Juan, do you have anything to add?
No, Elaine.
Okay, great. I think that wraps it up. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them along. But thank you for your time and attention today, and we look forward to working with you soon.